Joy.
Shall I go first? Jasmine, do you want to say anything? Shall I go? Okay. My name is Michael Mcdermott, and I am the co-founder, along with my late wife, Patricia Monahan, of the Black Earth Institute. And the Institute goes back to us watching television and watching Bush's second stolen election and thinking things were at rock bottom and they couldn't get much worse. We had better do something about it. So Patricia had a network of artists that included Allison, and we were able to come up with ideas of forming an organization of artists in the causes of spirituality, the earth, and social justice. And that was 18 years ago, and 22 issues of the journal. And it's been really an honor to be able to do this. Patricia died 10 years ago now. As far as the issue is concerned, because of COVID, we were not able to recruit new groups of fellows. And so the editing kind of got a little sparse. And Allison came out of her emeritus status. I called her and said, Allison, would you do this? And she said, yes, and she did. And that's really, I'm grateful. It's something that's been important to me to stay in touch with Allison. She was an original fellow all these years. We are centered in Black Earth, Wisconsin, and try to be aware of and reactive to the people who came before white settlers. Patricia has written poems about this area that are just heart-rending about this issue. And we, in our meetings here, have gone to places to honor spots. Allison and I actually toured a battle site that temporarily Blackhawks people were able to win at a certain place. And Blackhawks relatives actually came back for that. So we try to do that. We have, many of our fellows have been Native. And so we try to do that. I write about the settlements here and what came before that. So that's an ongoing effort. And I think we've been integral to it. It's been integral to us, but I think we always have to be more conscious of it. So I'm not going to say much more. Was really excited about this issue. Like I said, Allison just put this on her very, very busy plate when asked. And Katie and Jasmine and everybody has worked very, very hard on it. I want to give a little bit of a hand to our production team, Jesse Hughes, who we all know worked very well. And this is great. I mean, the issue's really doing well. I'm a numbers freak. It's really doing well. The content, I bounce from one to one and I go, whoa, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I want to thank people. I don't have much more to say or be very formal about it, except to thank y'all. And I think Katie has something to say as well.
Hello, everyone. So thank you so much for being here. And I am an assistant editor of the Navigations issue, where I had the pleasure of collaborating with the poets Jasmine Smith and Allison Hedgecoke. Unfortunately, Allison can't be fully present with us this afternoon due to technical difficulties. However, as Allison provided the vision for this issue, I wanted to briefly bring some of her words forward. This issue was guided by the need, as Allison articulated in the call for work, to find the currents and pathways that deliver us to intentional ways of being from the calamitous footprints colonial industry lays. With Allison's direction, the editorial team featured artists and writers who are engaging with the essence of sacred spaces and intentional navigations to protect, preserve, and enhance by return to traditional ecological knowledge. We also welcomed work from those who are able to locate solace and solution in other ways. As Allison puts it, we sought contributors who find possibilities beyond systems and movements configured from dominant colonial mindedness. So many of you are already quite familiar with Allison and her work, but for those of you who aren't, I'd like to highlight just a few of her achievements. Allison is a Fulbright Scholar and U.S. Library of Congress Witter Bitter Fellow. Allison began teaching following former fieldworker retraining in Santa Paula and Ventura in the mid-1980s, and she is now a distinguished professor of creative writing at the University of California, Riverside, which is where I met her and Jasmine as well. Allison has written several books of poetry, one book of nonfiction, and a play. Her most recent book of poetry, Look at This Blue, was released recently from Coffee House Press, and I urge you to pick up a copy. So assistant editor and coordinator of this reading, Jasmine Elizabeth Smith, has also recently released a gorgeous full-length collection of poems, South Flight, from the University of Georgia Press. South Flight was a finalist for the National Book Award and was selected by Ilya Kaminsky for the Georgia Poetry Prize. Jasmine's poetic work has been featured in Black Renaissance Noir, Poetry, Terrain's Letter to America Anthology, World Literature Today, and other publications. Jasmine is a Cave Canem Fellow, the poetry editor, and poetry program specialist for the Black Lights Art Collective, and a co-host of the radio show Baby Poet. She currently teaches language arts and creative writing in Seattle. So for me, editing this issue has been an incredibly moving experience. I'm honored to have had the chance to listen to so many voices reaching out and wanting to connect in a space of possibility, solution, and reckoning. So if you're willing, I'd like to take a second to lead you on an exercise that I've been using to support my own work. So take a second to listen to your breath and feel your feet on the ground. And once you've had a chance to do that, I'm hoping you'll be interested in thinking of the word possibility and thinking of all the connotations it brings up for you. So whether those are feelings or images or other words like justice or futurity. And then lastly, I'd like you to take a moment to feel the presence of possibility in your body. So this might be something that you feel in your fingertips or in your shoulders or in your feet. So just take a second to see if you can locate that feeling of possibility. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful for you. With that, I'd like to introduce our first reader. So our first reader is Mohammed Kabawar. Mohammed was born and raised in Aleppo. Immigrating to Canada at age 19, Kabawar earned a degree in history from Concordia University before becoming a graphic designer. Recent poetry chapbooks include The Soap of Aleppo, Evacuate, and Children of War. He is putting the final touches on his novel, The Bones of Aleppo. So thank you so much for being with us, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for accommodating the order. I just want to say that I'm reading from Aleppo. So if the electricity went off or if we lose connection, bear with me or keep that in mind. So I will read from my essay, Going Home. Here it is. We have reached the border of the city of Aleppo. The landscape was filled with oversized government posters and the smell of crushed buildings. I asked the driver what that strange and inhumane smell was. He said, This is the smell of carpet bombing. This is the smell of every conventional and unconventional weapon decimating culture, homes, civilizations, and the human will to survive. The smell of greed, the smell of billions of dollars poured into a proxy war. Right then, I regretted my decisions to come back home. Was I mad to be coming to Aleppo when my people were begging to go to Canada? As we made our way further into the city, recognizable neighborhoods flashed before my eyes, and I would look back through the window, utterly in shock. As we passed what used to be a grocery store, now covered in ruins, buildings on both sides were disfigured as if by a landslide. Roadblocks and checkpoints perforated the city. As I watched the destruction, I felt like I was sitting in a very difficult exam and knowing only half the answers. We crossed the intersection leading to our home. I wasn't sure if the home where I grew up had survived the bombing. 6 months earlier, a missile crashed through the ceiling of the apartment above us, turning the apartment into rubble. At first, I felt uneasy about seeing our home again, like an old friend I hadn't seen for many years. I rang the bell, and my mother rushed to open the door. We embraced, and then I sat in the living room. My mother asked me if I wanted breakfast. I said, "Coffee first, please." Coffee was much more than a beverage. It was a symbol of our culture. It carried beneath its skin and smell stories of a generation. The smell of coffee reminded me of visiting my maternal grandmother and going with my father to the neighborhood where he grew up to visit his distant cousin. It was October 14th, 2017, and it was a bright sunny day. I remember playing on the main balcony with my brother and sisters. I could see the view of the hill planted with pine trees and faded colors of the wall. The bullet holes in the kitchen windows. It was easier than I thought to come back home. Our place was in Western Aleppo and was almost undamaged, except for the bullet holes. To Western eyes, bullet holes and shrapnel disfigured walls count as damage. To Syrian eyes, it may be nothing. Eastern Aleppo and the old city were the most damaged. A rush of emotion consumed me as I went around the house, inspecting every room. I saw cracks in the paint and the shrapnel that disfigured the walls of the staircase. I looked at the hill in front of us and remembered the countless hours I played soccer with my friends, and how when I looked at our house, I saw my parents on the balcony waving. Now that world seemed so far away. A machine gun fired a few rounds into the dark skies. Then silence. The sound of the different metallic parts colliding into each other and the explosive sounds of higher caliber bullets sounded worse than the scream of an angry bear. The whole building shivered. In the afternoon, I tried to nap, but the sound of artillery fire kept me awake. Then it was so quiet. I could hear the sound of rustling sheets as I tossed and turned in my bed. Another round was fired without any return of fire. This was not a real war. where two armies of comparable might are fighting each other, but a war by permission. This means that if you see your enemies and can take them out, but you don't have orders to kill them, you don't. Thus, the war drags on for months and years until different factions who backed the war decided that it was in their financial and political interest to stop the war. The absurdity of the situation sent my mind reeling in every direction. Was it a reminder that the hostilities had not ended, or a reaffirmation of military might? Another bullet, this time a single bullet. The echo was more feared than its impact. What does a single bullet do in the scope of war, when it could be a bunch of soldiers drinking tea and shooting guns? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce our next reader, Brenda Delfino. She, her, is a migrant poeta, editor, translator, and educator based in Riverside, California. She is passionate about community coalition and creativity for self-determination and healing. She is a daughter and a sister and often explores the complexity of both identities in her work. Brenda received her MFA in creative writing and writing for the performing arts from the University of California in Riverside. She is a VONA and a Along the Chaparral Fellow. Her works have appeared in World Literature Today, Los Angeles Review of Books, Pacific Review, Spectrum Magazine, La Libreta, and elsewhere. She has organized and hosted numerous community readings and events. She's currently working on a micro chapbook of poems about her sister and mental health, and is a poetry editor at Break Bread. She is Poet B in the podcast Baby Poet.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you, Michael, for creating this space, and thank you, Jasmine, Katie, and Allison for editing this beautiful issue. I am reading from Riverside, California, which are the original homelands of the Cahuilla, Serrano, and Luiseño peoples. And I am very honored to be living and working in these homelands. So today I have two poems to share with you all.
Excuse me, Brenda, it's a little bit hard to hear you. Just want to tell you, if you could increase your volume, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for letting me know. Can you guys hear me better now? Is this a little better?
You might need to lean in a little more, Brenda. Just, I'm not sure what options you have there, but thank you for trying. Thank you.
Here, let me see.
It's better when you, it's better.
Okay, I'll be a little louder. Okay. My first poem is titled Foreign Sorrow. I've been robbing words from elegies since I walked this barren ground. By robbing, I don't mean permanent state powers, but more or less how the sorrow is borrowed. Y mis hijas, the ones I've yet to have, they live between the desire of my breasts and a future I cannot promise them to have. My tears are named after a woman whose cup palms held fresh water for all her animals to drink, how she pulled from the inside well of self-springing when her pleats to the sun dried out like cowhide. By barren, I don't mean unable to bear fruit. Maybe I misjudged the living desert until antelope sprung out from canyons in Zion, their red fur minerals manifesting in rock. Once I believed my fertility could bring balance back to earth. Once I thought I shed the burden of widows. I know the missing, my unnamed daughters, this fertile earth. And my second poem, titled Consider the Hands That Write This Letter, after Araceli Skirmay and Marina Wilson. Consider the hands that write this letter, the left palm steering the ink of this message as it has always done, this gut-driven desire to return to sun craters in grandma's hands, the imprint of time in her complexion. I saw once, felt once, hard labor's silent slap on the skin, how hands dry up like valleys when their giving is feeding, is touching, is the undernail scent of bleach and garlic. From her hands, I ate morning's gift, oatmeal, nuts, and honey, grew into daily devotion to Jah, his earth, and all who mother. For years, I have come to see her this way, one hand submerged in gray water, the other pulling at fabric as if to cast out demonios that wear us like clothes. And how I pray to return to her hands, rough fingers, slight bend to disease, a kindness to slow down giving. Though the giving keeps living beyond the body that lays to rest, though my hands don't know her labor, I will ink the page, I will reconstruct the hands, return to what birthed my becoming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Our next reader is Rushi Bhatia, who's a high school student from India who is currently studying at the Lawrence School in Sanawar. She is very enthusiastic about creative writing and dramatics. She has also participated in many creative writing competitions and is very active in her school's theater. Please welcome Arushi.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So people say that in order to move on ahead, you need to forget about the past. But if we say it is not very much possible to forget every single moment of your past, but what we can do is that we can learn from our past. And when we are trying to, find a way or navigate a way through your life, we should always remember those learnings. Now, I wrote this short poem about a person who's being nostalgic about their golden days. The title is The Droplets of Emotions. When I think of rain, I see a kingdom full of droplets, the hills being a castle of memories. Whenever I visit the hills, it seems that all the days gone by suddenly come to life. This regeneration of thoughts, the battle of emotions, the hills resounding with music, is continuously giving birth to a numerous recollections. The smell of earth, along with the mist rolling in, and the new leaves on the evergreen trees. These are the droplets of emotions. Dreamy, chuckled I. Yes, dreamy. What a dreamy feeling it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And our next reader is going to be Sandra Alcusar. Sandra Alcusar's poems have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Paris Review, Plowshares Poetry, and also the Pushcart Prize Anthology. She received 2 individual artist fellowships from the National Endowments of Arts, and her books of poetry, A Fish to Feed All Hunger, and Except by Nature, received the highest honors from the National Poetry Series, Academy of American Poets, and Associated Writer programs, as well as the Larry Levis Award and William Statford Award for Poetry. Her 4 artist book collaborations with Brighton Press have been exhibited internationally and reside in museums and special collections. She was the National Endowment of Art's first conservation poet for the Wildlife Conservation Society and Poets House, New York, as well as Montana's first poet laureate and recipient of the Merriman Award of Distinguished Contribution to Montana Literature. She founded and directs SD, SUs, MFA each fall.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, yes,
We
I
can-
can. Yes.
Good, good. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful to Michael and to the editors, Allison Hedgecock and Jasmine, Elizabeth Smith and Katie Curran and Jake, is it Heline? And the whole BEI team for the work that you do. I'm just coming to know about you and the work that you do. I was in an earlier issue that Pam Uchuk invited me to be part of and first learned of you there. So I want to read some things from my work with, various groups. This first poem is, it's a sonnet sequence, and I'll just kind of take a little breath in between each sonnet. As part of my work with the Wildlife Conservation Society, I performed at several three-nation bison conferences where ranchers and scientists and members of tribes from Canada, the United States, and Mexico have been brought together to discuss the future of bison on this continent. In doing the work like this, one reads so much about an animal that one's own self either fuses with or disappears entirely. So two of the poems I was invited to submit for two different About Place journals are both about bison, and I don't know how I'm going to have so many. I have a number of bison poems. I don't know how they're all going to fit in this next manuscript, but this is the one that Allison selected. It's All Flesh is Made of Grass. One body, two, I'm not like you. No one made a teacup for my bones or built a home where I stopped to wallow. No spider wove a web or bird blew up from my footsteps. No grass sprouted when I passed. But one body, too, standing across a vast meadow, I listen as your calf croons, and a woman's body swaddles me, scented with cold cream, a mother's moist breathing, her smoky breath. Dancing always brought them. Birds sank their feet into the fur of the bison, fluffing feathers deep above each spine, stealing for their warm nest weavings bits of curly hair and curled talons. Because tenacious droop withstood slow wind song of prairie, we called its flesh buffalo berry. Because they wallowed, because they ate flowers, because they loved their own kind, because they loved their own. 13 million bodies rifled, $2 a hide, 17 skeletons an acre, bison floating down river to Michigan Carbon Works fertilizer, boot black, sugar filters. Two sisters, 200 miles between, shared their oatcakes and tea at 10 each morning on bison bones. Boiling water for their lonely telepathy, the sisters steeped sagebrush leaves in flow blue china so delicate they could see its arteries, smell the pulverized bison inside. One body, two, I am not like you. Each trace you made became a city, a body to shelter a family, a hide to belt a steam machine, a body born walking with teeth, a body born prey that never sleeps, robes and humped ribs, cups and spoons, but warm body too, just like you. I began in a shadow of heat and water. It was thunder, it was shatter, a cloak, my mother. We are mammals together, steamy and dusty. All flesh is made of grass. This next poem is two sonnets. I was invited to collaborate with Michael Eade, who's a wonderful painter in New York, to respond for a performance at Symphony Space in New York titled 1963, which is the title of this poem. We were to center our work around the death of John Kennedy and the end of Camelot. I wanted my response to be from a female perspective. And because Rachel Carson's book, because of Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, John Fitzgerald Kennedy had appointed scientists to study the indiscriminate use of pesticides. And that led eventually to the birth of the EPA. Silent Spring has been called the most important chronicle of the century for the human race. It was completed while Carson was dying with breast cancer and marked the same 50-year anniversary as John Fitzgerald Kennedy's death. In '63, I was one of the girls at the seminary that I write about. Presidents and premiers addressed the young ladies of the seminary from outer space. Birds shimmy seeds into top nuts of trees, become strangler figs dangling toward gravity to shelter the young girls of the seminary, who sit in a circle of white pleats and blue blazers and listen to their leaders' voices from outer space preaching mutually assured destruction by land or sea. Who will they rocket next? A chimpanzee, fruit flies, a dog they snatch from the street? We cultivate enemy, roaring at reality with its roots in everything the king can see. One girl lacquers her hair into a torpedo. Who can we believe? We girls of the seedbed, we young ladies of the seminary. I just come to terms with fallout and along comes Rachel Carson. This is from a cartoon in Saturday Review. 1963, and the earth said, a little less poison, please. With rustling sounds through fallen leaves, the sparrows flitting understory said, yes, please. Less for me. The ant hoisting his brother's body in the nest said yes, and sharks feeding in the sea, and fish eagles building cribs of mops and lawn chairs, yes, and vultures who could not stop eating. A little less 2,4-D. Less DDT and BHC, a little less in our well, a little less in our bloodstream, from the nerves of earthworms to the ovaries of thrush and their exquisite melodies, for everything eating and eaten, a little less poison, please. And this last one, I was back in San Diego by this time and spent a lot of time at Wild Animal Park, where they were running a condor breeding and repopulation plan. And this poem comes from there. God, the condor. Many tribes have thought of the condor as God or as a God. I pull the god of thunder. I pull him from a nest. I pull a little nestling limp, hold him to my chest. From his stomach, take half a cup of plastic, half a cup of glass, and from his crop lift 4 bottle caps. What will make us well again? What will make us sing? Poisoned by ideas, poisoned by machines. God is cleaning up now. Now God is eating. Inside a clown pink face, lead bullet casings, a black bow of frames, his shoulders like a painting. Imagine no more soaring, no more Pleistocene, no more clouds pulled together by his wing beats. God's coming for us now. He looks a little queasy. He rubs his head against the rock. He sharpens his beak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jasmine.
Our next reader is Nathan Manley. So Nathan is a writer and erstwhile English teacher from Loveland, Colorado. He's the author of 2 chapbooks, Lumina Loci from Mighty Rogue Press and Ecology of the Afterlife from Split Rock Press. Recent poems and Latin translations have appeared or are forthcoming in Portland Review, Natural Bridge, Spillway, Puerto del Sol, Crab Creek Review, Think, and others. His work has been nominated for Best of the Net and a Pushcart Prize. You can find his writing and instrumental music on his website, which I believe will be in the chat. So thank you so much, Nathan.
Great. Thanks for having me for this. Thanks to Michael for all the work he's done building up this platform, and thanks to Jasmine and Katie for putting this little event together. I've got 2 poems to read from this navigations issue. They're a little unusual in their format. There's kind of some column text and some footnotes, which I think probably are not worth reading to you. I will say, just by reference to this first one, which is about kind of the mutualistic relationship between an aspen tree and a particular kind of mushroom, that aspens are kind of peculiar as trees in that they can reproduce by making seeds like other trees do, but they can also send up suckers, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and reproduce in this way that's completely asexual. And the result of that is that you can have stands of aspen that last for thousands and thousands of years. There are probably some aspen stands in the Western United States that are now genetically identical to trees that were standing at the end of the Pleistocene. And that's kind of an incredible thing to contemplate. So here's my poem. It is just called Quaking Aspen, Orange Cap Bolete. She'd wet the tendrils of a foundling thirst and pattern knit each phantom synapse dimmed to dirt, to darks of dreamless mastodon as purling up the rot-swept sockets she, now eldest of 1,000 sisters, split, twinning out her virid tresses, past grief grieving at the Pleistocene's mouth. The age of winter wasted toward an ocean, a black vastness after landscape, a drum. A comely aspen wood meanwhile began. Self-same sprung sister, sister, and sister. At each insistent rise, white-tongued fungus. Fibrillose, broad-capped, dullish, and gill-girt, wide-stipe blushing like a wine-bruised carpet. Mars to Prout's brown in youth, volutinous, late life pileus tawny to russet, spores of like hue, few to gregarious in litterfall, aspen trash, mild to taste and tender-fleshed, twining mycorrhizal, an easy, mutual thing, root music. Down centuries of sisters sweetly, she struck fast and sang, the bubbling boletes come, loosed of winter's anchorage, a bob, both born of water, blessed of rot, shriveled soon to soul stuff, death-tethered specimens pruned in a formaldehyde of borrowed words. old codes swimming yet the cell's soft cosmos. For all the rainfall's sweet religion gone. She will go too, the sisterhood in tow, and I, with springtime and the mammoth, I, who rummaged for a touch of lasting life, prized of her native continuity, of the bone-quiet communion of things, divined in the glass-eyed microscope I, who inked this offering, who tongued the skull for sheltering thought, sciences for sake of faith. And I have got a second poem here, kind of in a similar spirit, that is about the sugar beet, which is something that my family has cultivated on a farm in Weld County, Colorado for 5 generations now. And it is just called sugar beet. Planetscape blanched to a chemical peel. Furrow on furrow, tractor tread cracking the flatland through to the weed-lipped progress of Box Elder Creek, dribbling distantly, a sound of human speech alive in it. May and the green of my grandmother's grass, a relief on the landscape. Her farmhouse squat, hunkered like a wounded stag, vestige of the age of asbestos, of turquoise and television, an old radial pitched on the garret, spoke sharp and rusting there, hung like a weird horn from the forehead of the 20th century, a fool. The house, the stable in its ricket lean, stands empty. Someone's curtained up the glass, thistles in the window box, paint flaking down her door. The grandmother's gone to her bliss. How far, I wonder, from these people, hers, whom she could not bear to love. It's years since we pilgrimed a box of my mother's ash and chalked the rotten earth with turning it here. I'd occasion then asked, what should rise at judgment, steeped in so much bitterness? What should rise from the moon-fine dust, torn up through some hole in the world, wry and blinking to brush glyphosate crystal like dried salt from the corners of its eyes? What must rise? By June, wrinkled leaves like so many hands of beets will spring, gracious and fluttering with inscrutable gesture, bulbs plumping to bob come harvest in a sea of sweet. This thing, this troubled marvel of our time, will rise a marvel, and sweetly anyhow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next reader is Tammy Melody Gomez, who is an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and grassroots activist whose literary work, essays, poetry, and microfiction have been published in numerous anthologies, including Bike Equity, Money Class, and Bicycling, Entre Guadalupe, E. Malinche, and Together in Sudden Strangeness, America's Poets Respond to the Pandemic. Tammy wrote and co-directed the poetry video Trash Chauvin, which screened at both Cinefest and OC Film Fiesta in 2021. Profiled in Las Tianas, 300 Years of History, Tammy is a member of the Macondo Writers Workshop founded by Sandra Cisneros. She received a Texas Vignette Grant, one of the 5 female artists to receive this award in 2021, which supported her multimedia installation Sentence. Tammy was selected to participate in the inaugural Writing for Electronic Formats workshop in January 2022, hosted by Cultural Hub, La Mama, and facilitated by the playwright Eric N. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks for that intro, Jasmine. It's a joy to be here and hearing your work, everyone. Katie and Jasmine, I'm going to start with the piece that you accepted for the current About Place issue. And this poem came into higher relief for me yesterday when I found out that it's been suggested that the first European city that the Russian military forces would strike would be London. So here's this poem. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella, she rubs the lamp while I click my heels. And the amused gentleman in the sports jacket holding a broken flashlight smiles gently as he watches. And the soot-smeared face of the now orphaned child lights up as we smile in her direction and reach for her hand. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella, she has remembered the radio and I distribute the bread. And the shaken wife whose blonde husband is lost asks to sit with us and we quietly oblige. And the hungry teacher with the frostbitten toes thanks me for bread as I put my gloves on his feet. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella, we have not rehearsed for this moment, but we have instincts to trust in one another. The tunnel fills with our warmth and the voices begin to hum with happier notes. Much tenderness is shown. I know we have brought comfort without plan, and it is the least we can do. Our lives have prepared us for this. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella, her laughter disperses the smell of sorrow like ancestors taught us when we listened. In the metro tunnel with Gabriella, above us, the sirens sound, but all I choose to hear is the thump of brave hearts surviving through this darkness. And I want to say that I am representing from the North Texas area, the sacred and original homelands of the Comanches, the Wichita, Waco, and affiliated tribes folks. They are always in mind as I tread waters here, and as are my ancestors. I work out in a huipil. I work out in a huipil, its brilliant codices stitched into the hand-spun Oaxacan cotton in tight twists like these silken trenzas of Indio black hair. The longer my braids, the more indígena I feel. I pounce and pound in the fitness room and all the spaces where I work out my life philosophy. Look at the Tex-Mexerciser that I can be, growing muscles, chiseling shoulders, and showing my power in effective ways for my community. Yeah, that's the mover and shaker I want to work out to be. And yeah, the calories get burned as my waistline gets churned, but I read Chicana lit as I tread, so my cultura gets learned. While the copal smoke lifts high from the incense burner, because I'm a truth sojourner, clearing the negative to summon the spirits. Like that spring night in Oakland, long ago, when Rocky Rodriguez showed us how to light the fire for my first sweat lodge. And like a good coach for the Raza team, she taught us how to spin stories to get our minds running. I work out in huaraches with the tire tread soles to make this a good year, to make this time count. 100 years is how old the best runners are, the Raramuri elders, cruising a century, 100 miles, like it's a walk in the park essay. So I practice my indígena reps as I represent, keeping my momentum like the soaring quetzal bird high. My body tenses with exertion, the sweat drips and the muscles grip, but I will not live my life with my back bent in sorrow. So straight up, I stand tall, power through, so I can prosper tomorrow. This is survivor spirit. This is making life work. The stamina of my ancestors inspires me as I hear them talking in the headphones of my memory, like a motivational Tex-Mex mixtape. That's my jam. My workout is a ceremonia that chisels love into this muscle and fine-tunes my inner core huesos so that champion becomes my new name and my brave brown body glistens like the buffed bronze frame of a Mayan goddess at the top of her game. I'll close with this last piece. It was part of a project I initiated in 2007 to attempt to write a poem a day. And this is poem 158 of 365, AKA If Buddhist Monks Did Exhibition Sports on ESPN. When the orange-jerseyed Buddhist monks did a head-to-head with the acolytes from Burma, I knew a battle was forthcoming. At the lip-off, The monk from Dharamsala uttered lyrical lines from the Dhammapada, while the Tibetan Rinpoche used a wizened tongue to outline his mouth, as if he was sounding a singing bowl at a stupa. It was dizzying, the flashy frenzy of the saffron robes swishing this way and that, as the bare-legged men hugged and danced from the starting whistle to the midway timeout, at which point they feasted on momos and butter tea and debated the finer points of Buddhist cosmology. I saw two monks from Bhutan battle it out over the last of the rice, spitting smiles that could charm a lion and frothing with delight in the midwinter sun as the Shambhala in their hearts became a city for real. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That was wonderful. So I'm going to introduce our last reader, Christine Ray Anderson's chapbook Field of Everlasting is forthcoming from Main Street Rag Publishing Company. Her poetry has appeared in Copperfield Review, Soundings East, Reed, and Crab Creek Review, among other publications. She has received Mollusk Bay and Fish Trap Fellowships, as well as first place award in the Mary C. Moore Poetry Contest from Southern Indiana Review. As a journalist, Christine won awards from San Diego Press Club and the Society of Professional Journalists and the San Diego chapter. The San Diego chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, apologies. She holds an MFA in poetry from New England College and recently retired from there almost 3 decades as an English professor in the Riverside Community College District. Currently, Christine volunteers as a literacy tutor for children and adults. She lives with her family and their 3-legged rescue dog in Southern California. Please welcome Christine.
Thank you. The unmute was a little stubborn. Thank you, Katie, and thank you to Allison and to Jasmine and all of the editors of About Place Journal. And thank you also to the Black Earth Institute for the important work you do. I also want to say to the viewers of this reading, thank you for the gift of your time. I'm going to read my poem, Planting. My grown son sits cross-legged in the backyard. Under him, worn blue cotton spread over the dirt, a childhood towel that once kept him dry and warm. Now, homebound by the pandemic, he trims native buckwheat planted one previous spring, finally grown into its own. I have something mundane to ask. Maybe whether he'd like a cup of coffee. I've made a fresh pot. Or maybe I want to ask how he grew so close to the soil from parents who spent every day with open books and pens in their hands. I crouch beside him at the edge of the towel, watching. His firm grip on the clippers, gentle grasp on the stems, when a heavy flying June beetle buzzes between us. We watch it circle in to land nearby. This time of year, they're laying eggs, my son says. Sure enough, the beetle leans in head first and begins to dig. Her front legs burrow steadily as we talk, my son laying out plans for new planting this fall, natives that will fill out in years, beets and carrots and chard we'll be eating in months. Every so often, we turn to check. The beetle steadfastly mines into the soft earth to make a birthplace for her children, her head disappearing into the ground, leaving less and less of her. Deeper and deeper she sinks until she's gone completely. If she does her job well, eggs will hatch in the warm underground, and next spring, her children will poke out into the world, flying among flourishing buckwheat and sweet peppers my son has planted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful reading. And I wanted to take a few moments just to kind of center us all kind of in conversation to talk a little bit about your work and how it aligns to the call for the issue and also works to create those pathways of solace and solution during these calamitous times. And so just as kind of a standard, so we're not talking over one another since we're on a Zoom format, if you wanted to raise your hand, Jake can unmute you. There's a little bit of balance around that. So our first question is, how does your work center BEI's mission of reforging the links between art and spirit, earth, and society?
The connections that I see are through the art that really connects us to truth. I think this is one of the things that art is always allowing us to do, whether we are creating the art or we are reading or viewing artistic work. It helps us connect with truth, which always, for me at least, always goes back to nature and from our spirits. Those are always interconnected. And I see that as the value of art.
For me, writing poetry is kind of the way that I grapple with maybe things I don't have solutions or answers to. So I go to poetry to sometimes ask those hard questions. And so I think like my first poem that I read kind of poses a question that I don't have an answer to yet, which is, you know, should I have children? Can I have children? Can I give my children, you know, a future in this, you know, in today's age? And I don't think I have an answer for that, but my second poem is kind of where I find solace and kind of peace when I think about my grandma and, you know, the work that she did raising me and always being there for my family and working so hard. And so I think of her and her hard labor, you know, and how that has got me to the place I am today. And so thinking about my family and also that, you know, at the end of the day, the love that, you know, got me to this place, you know, at the end of the day, that's kind of where I find shelter, just thinking about that love that materializes, you know, in things like family and friendships.
Okay, I have one more question. Thank you so much, Christine and Brenda, for those responses. And this might be a bit of a repetition as well too, but I do have one more question. So how do you feel that your work helps create pathways for peace and also locate readers and solutions of solace during these calamitous times? And also thinking more broadly, right, this is a small sampling of the work that you all are doing as well too. So would also be interested in broader work outside of, within this issue and also outside of that as well.
I think I can take that up a little bit. I know something that is kind of a central concern for me in writing is sort of trying to exist in a place where conversations are not happening because disciplines have been so rigorously specialized to the point that they're sort of no longer talking to each other. I think part of that is a result of just kind of like the structure of the modern university. But there's this amazing wealth of like scientific knowledge and experimentation that is constantly going on, and a lot of it to a layperson is completely unreadable, right? It's kind of steeped in this jargon that's very difficult to penetrate without a lot of training. And in other ways too, I think it really kind of fails to speak to the concerns of the heart. And I am interested in kind of sort of finding a way in art to bring this to the attention of people, to sort of let these amazing things that are being discovered and explored speak to people in a way that they don't in the context of like a scientific paper. So I think I'm interested in how art can be kind of a nexus for sort of creating conversations between disciplines that have become sort of disparate as a result of historical processes.
Yes. Through readings, I used to live in Calgary and Vancouver, and I used to do a lot of open mics and readings. So increasing awareness about the war in Syria and in Aleppo, the destruction of the old city, was my path to peace. And my goal was in every reading, if I can convince only, or if I can influence only 5 people a reading, then I feel I have done my job as a poet and as a writer. And in publishing, I published a couple of chapbooks on poetry on the war in Syria and Aleppo. And when I've done readings in the UK and in Canada, and I feel that when people buy the book, when I give them the book, when they buy it as presents to their family and friends over Christmas or other occasions, I feel that is my own contribution towards peace. And there's also the chance reader who finds a book in a library or a bookstore, and it's something I could not stop doing, writing and reading and being part as a human being in this disappointing world, both on the climate change battle. We've had one of the coldest summer in Aleppo this year. It's like a European summer. It's like early fall or late spring, which we are used to 40 degrees or 50 degrees Celsius. So this is completely a big change. And in terms of wars, when I saw the beginning of the Ukraine war, I just imagine myself like the painting of the screen. It's like, oh God, not another war, because we have seen the absolute inhumanity of war, and we did not want to see another country go through it. But international politics have different measures. So that is, my path to peace. Thank you.
I've long felt that when those Sunday news talk programs happen on national television here in the US, that they should include at least one poet on those panels, because we are also residents of the planet, citizens of our given home country, or adopted home country, and we have opinions about things going on around us. We are also suffering. We're also oppressed by the things that oppress others. We're not a unique and immune to pain species just because we are able to distance sometimes and intellectualize sometimes about the topics we discuss and write about. So in the sense of that, since I'm not being invited to Weekend Review on national television, I frame my work in ways that can be accessible to folks who are not very literary, or maybe not even so literate. And I think it's important for me to keep my family in mind, my mother and my siblings and other family members around me who are still within my sphere of influence. And then beyond that, others, audience members, of course, if I'm a public, if I'm able to publicly present my work in forums like this. Thank you. Shout out to the YouTube listeners right now. So it's about making your way into spaces where you feel there's a need and where you feel that the poet's voice could possibly contribute a tone, a sentiment, or a perspective that is not being already presented. And I feel that if we are professionals in our profession, that we should be invited to such tables, or we make the table. Currently, I host a monthly online reading, Dando poetry series, and I launched that in November of 2020. And it goes nationwide, and at times people from South America and Mexico and Nepal have joined us. But it's a way for us to speak as the experts we are, residing in the locations where we are based, and sometimes hearing from a poet through metaphor and rhyme and poetic forms, what it's like for you to be going through climate change. What's it like there? Is it the flooding? Is it high wind speeds? Is it tornadic activity? Is it droughts? And so we share the work, but we also share conversation that helps kind of expand the context for each other, because we're only meeting online. So it's a way to represent the places where we live and love and work. Another thing that's important to me is to meet the physical needs of people. I'm involved with a group organization here in town called Funky Town Fort Worth, and they basically have refrigerators around the city and shelving units where you can drop off food for people, and it's just pick up what you can, leave what you can. So those kinds of mutual aid systems, I think, are becoming more prevalent since the beginning of the pandemic. I hope they continue, and I think poets, we're definitely keeping our head down to the page that we're writing on, but I hope we also lift our head up to see what the needs are of the people around us. I'm also involved with a project called I Am Troy Davis, based on the book of the same name that came out on the publisher Haymarket Books. And that work, I Am Troy Davis, is based on a person who claimed innocence to the end of his life when he was executed in 2011. And that work has been adapted for the stage, and I'm a member of the performance team here in Texas to present that work. So how we get plugged in can vary from stage work to film work to being asked to co-sign on to group writing projects, etc. And I think that's what's kept me very driven in terms of being a poet, because I believe very deeply that I want to see the fruits of the impact of my work. And I have not really prioritized publishing, actually, until just the last 5 or 7 years, because it's been most important for me to meet my audience in person, face to face, mano a mano, doing the work together on the front lines as activists or on stages across the country. And it's a vital place and a vital way to be for me. It works for me. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. I just want to close out and thank you all for the work that you are doing in terms of activism, in terms of conservation work, in terms of your poetry and your writing. It has been an honor to be in this space with you all. And I just want to close out with a bit of gratitude for the Black Earth Institute, for Michael, for making this space possible, for Jesse, and for Jake as well too, that have worked tirelessly on not only helping facilitate this reading, but also with the issue, to each of our contributors, and to our audience, and of course Katie Gurin, and our head editor Allison Hedgecock. Thank you all.
All right, I've ended the stream.